The November rain hammered against the windows of Morrison and Associates, creating rivulets that distorted the Chicago skyline beyond. I sat in the conference room, my hands wrapped around a lukewarm cup of coffee, waiting for Uncle Richard to arrive. At 28, I'd been working at the family construction business for 6 years, but I still felt like that nervous college graduate who'd walked through these doors for the first time. "Sorry to keep you waiting, Emma," Richard's voice boomed, as he entered, not sounding sorry at all. He was a large man, built like the steel beams our company installed in high-rises across the Midwest. His gray suit stretched across his shoulders, and his tie always silk hung perfectly straight despite his hurried entrance. "No problem," I said, straightening in my chair. "I finished reviewing the Riverside project proposals." While I waited, he waved dismissively, settling into the leather chair at the head of the table. The same chair my grandfather had sat in when he ran the company, the same one my father should have inherited if cancer hadn't taken him when I was 16. "Listen, Emma," Richard began, his thick fingers drumming on the mahogany table. "We need to talk about your future here?" My stomach tightened. Those words never preceded anything good. "I've been watching you," he continued, his pale blue eyes so different from my father's warm brown ones, fixed on me with an intensity that made me want to shrink. 6 years, and what do you have to show for it? You're still making rookie mistakes. That mix-up with the Brennan account last month cost us nearly $50,000. That wasn't entirely my fault," I interjected, my voice steadier than I felt. "The supplier changed their specifications without notifying us. I caught it before it became a bigger problem. You should have caught it before it became a problem at all." His hand slammed the table, making my coffee cup jump. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. No accountability. No real business instinct." I felt heat rising to my cheeks. "I've brought in 3 major clients this year alone." "The Westfield development project was a gimme," he interrupted. "They came to us because of our reputation, not because of anything you did. Face it, Emma, you're here because your family, because your father was my brother. But charity only goes so far." The word charity stung like a slap. I'd graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern with a degree in business management. I'd spent my summers since high school learning every aspect of this company, from mixing concrete to reading blueprints to negotiating with unions. But to Richard, I was just playing dress-up in a hard hat. "I've earned my position here," I said quietly but firmly. Richard leaned back, the chair creaking under his weight. "Have you? Let me paint you a picture of reality. In 2 years, when Dad really retires, this time someone needs to take over. The board is already asking questions about succession. And frankly, Emma, you're not even in the conversation. Because you've made sure of that," I shot back, surprising both of us with my boldness. His eyes narrowed. "Because you're not ready. You think because you can read a P&L statement and schmooze with clients at dinner parties that you understand this business. This industry chews up people like you and spits them out before lunch. People like me. Soft, privileged, book-smart, but street-stupid." He stood, his shadow falling across the table. "You want to know what everyone really thinks. They tolerate you because of your last name. But when push comes to shove, when we need someone who can make the hard decisions, who can stare down a union boss, or tell a client their dream project is structurally impossible, you fold, like a cheap suit." Each word was carefully chosen to wound, and they found their mark. But something else stirred beneath the hurt, a cold, crystallizing anger I'd never felt before. "You know what I think." I stood too, meeting his gaze despite the trembling in my legs. "I think you're scared. I think you see Dad in me, and you know he would have run this company better than you ever could." Richard's face flushed red. "Your father was a dreamer who would have bankrupted us with his bleeding projects and environmental nonsense. His environmental nonsense is now industry standard. Every proposal I've seen from our competitors includes the sustainable practices he pioneered 20 years ago." "Get out," Richard said quietly, which was somehow more terrifying than his shouting. "Take the rest of the day off. Think about whether you really belong here." I gathered my papers with steady hands, though my heart was racing. At the door, I turned back. "You want to know what Grandpa told me before he died? He said the company needed vision to survive the next generation. He said you were a perfect manager but a terrible visionary. Maybe that's why you're so threatened by anyone who thinks beyond the next quarter's profits." I left before he could respond, walking through the office with my head high despite feeling the curious glances of my coworkers. They'd probably heard the shouting. By tomorrow, everyone would know about our confrontation. In the elevator, I caught my reflection in the polished steel doors. Dark hair pulled back in a professional bun, the same strong jaw as my father, the same determined set to my mouth, but around my eyes, I saw doubt. Maybe Richard was right. Maybe I was just playing at being a businesswoman. The parking garage was dimly lit and smelled of motor oil and damp concrete. I found my car, a modest Honda Civic I'd bought with my own salary. Not the BMW Richard had tried to give me as a company car, and sat behind the wheel without starting the engine. My phone buzzed. A text from Marcus, my boyfriend of 3 years. How did the meeting go? Thai food tonight. I stared at the screen, unable to form a response. How could I explain that my uncle had just torn apart every professional accomplishment I thought I'd achieved? That the family business I'd devoted my adult life to saw me as nothing more than an obligation? Another text appeared, this one from Sarah, my best friend since college. Drinks after work. I have gossip about the Hartley acquisition. The Hartley acquisition. One of the biggest potential deals in Chicago commercial real estate. Morrison and Associates had been circling it for months, but so had our competitors. Richard had pointedly excluded me from those meetings. I started the car and pulled out of the garage into the gray Chicago afternoon. The rain had softened to a drizzle, and the streets were slick and shining. As I drove, my mind wandered to all the times I'd bitten my tongue in meetings, all the ideas I'd swallowed because Richard had dismissed them with a look, all the clients who'd asked to work with me specifically, only to be redirected to one of Richard's hand-picked project managers. At a red light, I noticed we were near the old South Side site, one of my father's last projects before he got sick. He'd wanted to build affordable housing there, mixed-income units that would revitalize the neighborhood without displacing longtime residents. Richard had killed the project the month after the funeral, calling it financial suicide. Now, 15 years later, the lot sat empty, a chain-link fence surrounding nothing but weeds and broken concrete. A metaphor for all of my father's dreams that Richard had systematically dismantled. My phone rang through the car speakers. Grandpa. I almost didn't answer at 91. He didn't need to hear about family drama, but he'd know something was wrong if I avoided him. Emma, sweetheart. His voice was thin but warm. I'm sitting here with my coffee, watching the rain, and I thought of you. How's my favorite granddaughter? Your only granddaughter, I said, managing a small smile. Still my favorite. You sound tired. Richard giving you trouble again? I shouldn't have been surprised. After 7 decades in business and raising 2 very different sons, Samuel Morrison could read people like blueprints. It's nothing I can't handle, I lied. The sound was non-committal, but I could picture his knowing expression. You know, your father used to say the same thing, right before he'd come up with some brilliant solution that would prove all the doubters wrong. I'm not Dad, Grandpa. No, you're not, you're you. And that's exactly what this company needs, whether certain people realize it or not. He paused, and I heard him sip his coffee. Emma, do you know why I gave Richard operational control when I stepped back? Because he was older, more experienced, because he was safe, Grandpa interrupted. After losing your father, I wasn't brave enough to take risks. Richard would maintain what I'd built, never gambling it away. But maintaining isn't the same as growing. A company that doesn't evolve dies a slow death. Tell that to Richard. He just told me I'm worthless to the company. That I'm only here out of charity. The silence stretched so long I thought we'd lost connection. Then, is that so? Well, perhaps. It's time I attended next month's board meeting, after all. I may be retired, but I still own 40% of the voting shares. Grandpa, no. I don't want you fighting my battles. Who said anything about fighting? I just want to observe. See how my legacy is being managed. His tone was innocent, but I knew that voice. It was the same one he'd used before orchestrating the merger that had doubled our company's size in the 80s. After we hung up, I found myself driving aimlessly through the city. The rain had stopped, and weak sunlight broke through the clouds, making the wet streets gleam. I passed construction sites bearing our company logo, buildings my family's sweat and vision had helped create. This city's skyline bore our fingerprints, even if my uncle thought I contributed nothing to that legacy. I pulled into a small coffee shop in Lincoln Park, one of those cozy places with exposed brick and the smell of freshly ground beans. As I waited for my order, I overheard 2 women at the next table discussing business plans. They looked about my age, professional, confident. One was showing the other financial projections on a tablet. If we can secure the initial funding, we'll be the first firm in Chicago to specialize in sustainable retrofitting for historic buildings, she said. My ears perked up. That was exactly the kind of innovation my father had championed, preserving the past while building for the future. The kind of idea Richard would dismiss as trendy nonsense. Emma. I turned to find David Chen, a commercial real estate developer I'd met at various industry events. He was young, successful, and had a reputation for taking calculated risks. That paid off. David, hi. I accepted my coffee from the barista and turned back to him. What brings you to this neighborhood? Scouting a potential site. Mind if I join you for a minute? I've been meaning to reach out. We found a table by the window. David had an easy confidence that reminded me why he'd become so successful so quickly. He'd started with nothing, built his company from the ground up, and now competed with firms that had been around for generations. I heard Morrison and Associates might be bidding on the Hartley project, he said, stirring sugar into his espresso. You heard correctly. I kept my voice neutral, not mentioning I'd been excluded from those discussions. Good. I respect your company. Your grandfather built something remarkable. He paused, studying me. I also heard you've been bringing in some impressive clients lately. The Westfield project was clever. Nobody else saw the potential in that location. So much for Richard's claim that it had been a gimme. Thank you, though I can't take all the credit. Modesty doesn't suit you, Emma. Own your successes. He leaned forward slightly. Can I be frank? I've been watching your career. You have good instincts, better than you probably realize. If you ever decide you want to build something of your own, instead of fighting for scraps at someone else's table, he left the sentence unfinished, but the implication was clear. I could leave Morrison and Associates, start fresh somewhere that would value my contributions. The thought was simultaneously terrifying and thrilling. I appreciate that, David, but Morrison and Associates is my family's company. I'm not ready to give up on it. He smiled. I didn't think you were. But sometimes the best way to save something is to let it fail first. Sometimes people need to see what they're losing before they appreciate what they had. After he left, I sat alone, watching the city wake up from the afternoon rain. His words echoed in my mind, mixing with Richard's cruel dismissal and Grandpa's quiet support. A plan began to form, hazy at first, then crystallizing like the Chicago skyline emerging from fog. Richard thought I was worthless. That the company only tolerated me out of obligation. Maybe it was time to show him exactly what Morrison and Associates would look like without me. And more importantly, what I could build without him. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found the number I was looking for. James Hartley, owner of the Hartley development that everyone was circling like sharks. We'd met once at a charity gala, had a long conversation about architecture and legacy. He'd given me his card, said to call if I ever had ideas about his project. My finger hovered over his number. Making this call would change everything. It would mean war with Richard, potentially fracturing the family business my grandfather had spent his life building. But as I thought about my father, about empty lots that should have been thriving communities, about 6 years of swallowed pride and dismissed ideas, I realized the war had already begun. Richard had fired the first shot today. I pressed call. Mr. Hartley. This is Emma Morrison. I was wondering if you might be free for coffee this week. I have some ideas about your development that I think you'll find interesting. As I spoke, I watched the sun finally break through the clouds completely, bathing the city in golden light. The storm was over, but I had a feeling it was just the beginning of something much bigger. That night, I met Marcus for Thai food as planned. He could tell something was different. I was quieter than usual, but there was something in my eyes that made him ask, "What are you planning?" "I'm not sure yet," I admitted, twirling pad thai on my fork. "But I think it's time I stopped trying to prove myself to people who've already made up their minds about me." "About time," he said, surprising me. "I've watched you shrink yourself to fit into spaces that were never built for you. Whatever you're thinking of doing, I'm here for it." As we walked home through the city streets, still damp from the rain, I felt something shift inside me. Richard's words still stung, might always sting. But they'd also freed me. If he already thought I was worthless, I had nothing left to lose, and everything to gain. The Hartley meeting was set for Thursday morning at his private office in the Willis Tower. I'd spent 3 days preparing. Working late into the nights at my apartment, spreading blueprints and financial projections across my dining room table, until Marcus joked that he needed a hard hat just to get to the kitchen. "You're nervous," Sarah observed Wednesday evening. finding me at our usual wine bar in River North. She was already halfway through a glass of Cabernet, her lawyer's suit still crisp despite a full day of depositions. Terrified, I admitted, sliding into the booth across from her. If Richard finds out I'm meeting with Hartley behind his back, he'll— What? Fire you? Hate you? Sarah's eyebrows rose. Honey, from what you've told me, that ship has sailed. Besides, you're not doing anything wrong. Last I checked, networking wasn't a criminal offense. I'd been telling myself the same thing, but hearing it from Sarah helped. She'd left her family's law firm 2 years ago to join a competitor, and her father still wasn't speaking to her. But she was making partner next year, something that never would have happened under her family's thumb. What do you know about the Hartley project? I asked, signaling the waitress. Sarah's eyes lit up. She loved industry gossip almost as much as she loved litigation. $60 million mixed-use development. Hartley's been sitting on the land for 3 years, waiting for the right proposal. Word is he's turned down half a dozen offers because they didn't align with his vision, which is, that's the $1 million question. Or $60 million question. She leaned forward conspiratorially, but I heard from a client who knows him that it's personal. Something about honoring his late wife's memory. She was big into community development. Apparently, community development. The word sparked something in my mind, connecting to conversations with my father years ago, his dreams of building more than just structures. That night, I called Grandpa. He answered, on the second ring, sounding more alert than any 91-year-old had a right to at 10 p.m. Can't sleep either. He asked without preamble. How did you know? Because you're a Morrison. We don't sleep when we're planning something big. I heard the smile in his voice. Want to tell me about it? I hesitated. Part of me wanted to protect him from family drama, but I needed his wisdom more than I needed to shield him. I'm meeting with James Hartley tomorrow. About his development project. Just one syllable, but it carried weight. Does Richard know? No. Good. He looked frailer than he had even a few weeks ago, but his eyes were sharp as ever. Heard you impressed Hartley, he said without preamble. How could you possibly know that already? He chuckled. I've been in this business for 70 years. Sweetheart, you think I don't have ears everywhere? His expression grew serious. Richard's getting nervous. He called me this afternoon, fishing about whether I'd been talking to you about the company's future. What did you tell him? The truth. That I talk to my granddaughter regularly because I love her. He cut into his steak with practiced precision. He's also been making calls about the Hartley project. Seems their initial proposal was rejected. Good, I said, then caught myself. You mean good, Grandpa interrupted. It's okay to want to win, Emma. The question is what you do with victory. I don't have victory yet. Just a second meeting. But you're thinking beyond that meeting, aren't you? You're seeing possibilities. I nodded slowly. What if Morrison and Associates could be what Dad envisioned? What if we could build communities, not just buildings? The profit margins would be lower, but the impact would be the legacy worth leaving. Grandpa finished. Your father used to say profit without purpose was just greed with better accounting. We ate in comfortable silence for a while, the restaurant buzzing around us with the energy of Chicago's business district. The December board meeting, Grandpa said suddenly. I'll be there. Grandpa, you don't have to. I own 40% of the company. Richard has 30. The remaining 30 is split among board members and minority shareholders. He smiled. Interesting things can happen when ownership percentages start moving around. What are you planning? Me. Nothing. I'm just an old man who wants to see his company in good hands before he dies. But his eyes sparkled with the same intensity I'd seen in photos from his younger days, when he'd built Morrison and Associates from nothing into an empire. That night, I worked until 3 a.m., fueled by coffee and determination. The Hartley proposal grew from a concept into a comprehensive plan. I pulled in everything I'd learned in 6 years, every connection I'd made, every innovation I'd researched, but never been allowed to implement. Marcus found me asleep at the dining table, my head pillowed on financial projections. You're going to war? He said softly, covering me with a blanket. No, I mumbled, half awake. I'm going to win. The next morning, coffee with David Chen confirmed my suspicions. Word was spreading through the Chicago development community that something was happening at Morrison and Associates. That the heir apparent wasn't who everyone had assumed. If you pulled this off, David said, if you actually land Hartley and reshape Morrison and Associates, you'll change the game for everyone. There are a lot of us who believe in sustainable, community-focused development but get voted down by boards obsessed with quarterly returns, and if I fail, then you'll have excellent job offers from about 15 competitors, including me," he grinned. "But I don't think you're going to fail. You've got something Richard doesn't." "What's that?" "Hunger. He's protecting what he has. You're building what could be." As I walked back to the office, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Miss Morrison, this is James Hartley. I've moved our next meeting to Monday. I'll be bringing some additional parties who are interested in your vision. Be prepared to present to a group. Additional parties, investors, board members." Either way, the stakes had just risen dramatically. I had 4 days to prepare the presentation of my life. 4 days to prove that I wasn't worthless, that my father's vision could live again, that Morrison and Associates could be more than Richard's monument to safe mediocrity. The war David mentioned. It had already begun, and I was playing to win. Monday arrived with the kind of bitter cold that made Chicago winters infamous. Ice crystals formed on the inside of my apartment windows, and the radiator clanged its morning protest. I'd been awake since 4, running through my presentation one more time. "You're going to wear a hole in the floor," Marcus said from the doorway, watching me pace. He was already dressed for court, looking impossibly put together for 6 a.m. 12 people, I said, continuing my circuit around the living room. "Hartley's bringing 11 additional people to this meeting." "Who brings 11 people to a development pitch?" "Someone who's serious about making a decision." Marcus caught me mid-pace, hands on my shoulders. "Emma, you've got this. Your proposal is brilliant. More importantly, it's right." I wanted to believe him, but my nerves felt like live wires under my skin. This wasn't just about landing a client anymore. This was about proving that my vision for Morrison and Associates could work. My phone buzzed. "Sarah, wear the black suit. Trust me, and remember you're not asking for permission to be brilliant. You're showing them what brilliance looks like." By the time I reached the address, Hartley had provided a private conference room at the Chicago Club. My hands had finally stopped shaking. The doorman recognized me, which shouldn't have been surprising. The Chicago Club was where the city's old money made its biggest decisions. "There in the Palmer Room, Miss Morrison," he said. 12th floor. The elevator was all mahogany and brass, a reminder of when craftsmanship mattered more than speed. I used the ride to center myself, thinking of my father, of Grandpa, of all the times Richard had tried to make me feel small. The Palmer Room doors were closed. I could hear voices inside, many voices. I knocked once and entered. The room fell silent. James Hartley stood at the far end of a conference table that could have seated 20. Around it sat 11 people I recognized from newspaper photos and industry events. My stomach dropped as I processed who he'd assembled. Margaret Chen, CEO of Chuntech Industries. Robert Walsh, whose family foundation had revolutionized education funding in Illinois. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, who ran the largest healthcare nonprofit in the Midwest. These weren't just potential investors, they were Chicago's social impact elite. "Miss Morrison," Hartley said warmly, "thank you for joining us. Please, take your time setting up." I moved on autopilot, connecting my laptop to the projection system while my mind raced. This wasn't just about one development. Hartley had assembled people who could transform how Chicago thought about urban construction. "Before we begin," Hartley addressed the room, "I want to explain why I've asked you all here. For 3 years, I've been looking for the right partner for Margaret's final project. I've seen dozens of proposals, all promising maximum returns, minimal risk, standard approaches. Last week, Emma Morrison showed me something different. I think you'll want to hear it." No pressure. I stood, smoothed my jacket, and began. "Good morning. I'm here to talk about building more than buildings. About creating spaces that serve communities while generating sustainable returns. About proving that profit and purpose aren't mutually exclusive." I clicked to my first slide, not a rendering or a financial projection, but a photograph of the empty lot where my father had once dreamed of affordable housing. 15 years ago, Morrison and Associates killed a project that would have brought mixed-income housing to the South Side. The official reason was financial non-viability. The real reason was fear that doing good meant sacrificing profit, that serving communities meant accepting mediocrity. Margaret Chen leaned forward slightly. "Good," I had their attention. "That thinking has dominated our industry for too long. We build luxury towers while teachers can't afford to live in the cities where they work. We create retail spaces that push out local businesses. We measure success in square footage and rental rates, not in communities strengthened or lives improved. I moved through my presentation methodically. The architectural plans that integrated community spaces naturally into the design. The financial models showing how social programs could be self-sustaining through strategic commercial partnerships. The phased construction approach that would minimize displacement of current residents. The Hartley development isn't just a building project, I said, reaching my crescendo. It's a proof of concept. Proof that Chicago can lead a new model of urban development. Richard's a good operations man, but he thinks too small. Always has. Grandpa paused, and I heard ice clinking in a glass. Hartley's an interesting man. Met him once, years ago. His wife, Margaret, was remarkable. Ran literacy programs all over the South Side. When she died, he nearly sold everything and disappeared. What stopped him? Purpose. He decided to build something that would honor her memory. Not just a building, but something that would continue her work. Another pause. Emma, do you know why I started this company? I'd heard the story before: immigrant grandfather, American dream, building a legacy, but something in his tone suggested there was more. Tell me, I said softly. My father died in a factory collapse in 1922. Shoddy construction, cut corners to save money. 30 men died because someone decided their lives were worth less than profit margins. His voice hardened with old anger. I started Morrison and Associates because I believed we could build things that lasted, that protected people instead of endangering them. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. Got caught up in growth for growth's sake. Grandpa ... Your father never forgot, and neither have you. So whatever you're planning with Hartley, make it count. The next morning came too quickly. I dressed carefully, my best suit, the one that made me feel like I could conquer the world. Navy blue, perfectly tailored with the small diamond studs my father had given me for college graduation. The Willis Tower stretched into low-hanging clouds, its top invisible in the morning mist. As I rode the elevator to the 6th floor, I reviewed my proposal one last time. Not the standard Morrison and Associates pitch that Richard would have prepared, but something different. Something that honored both Hartley's vision and my father's legacy. James Hartley's office was surprisingly modest for a man worth hundreds of millions. Books lined the walls, and photographs covered every surface, many featuring a warm-faced woman I assumed was Margaret. Miss Morrison. Hartley stood to greet me. He was in his 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. I was intrigued by your call. Please, sit. I took the offered chair, noticing it faced not his desk but a comfortable seating area, with a view of the city sprawling below. Thank you for seeing me, Mr. Hartley. I know you're busy, and I'm sure you've been approached by every developer in Chicago, including Morrison and Associates, he said with a slight smile. Your uncle sent quite an impressive proposal last month. All glass and steel, very modern. The returns projections were ambitious. My heart sank a little. Of course Richard had already made his pitch. But Hartley's tone suggested he hadn't been won over. I haven't seen my uncle's proposal, I admitted. I'm here with something different. Oh, he leaned back, fingers steepled. I'm listening. I pulled out my tablet, hand steady despite my nerves. I've been researching your wife's work. The Margaret Hartley Foundation has helped thousands of families. But since her passing, the foundation has struggled to maintain its programs without her direct involvement. His expression tightened slightly, pain, even after 5 years. What if, I continued carefully, the development wasn't just named after her, but actively continued her work? Not a monument, but a living legacy. I showed him my plans. Not the towering glass monument Richard would have proposed, but a thoughtful mixed-use development, street-level spaces for community programs, affordable housing units integrated seamlessly with market-trade condos, a literacy center that would be run by the Margaret Hartley Foundation with sustainable funding from the commercial tenants. The financials are more conservative than what you've probably seen, I admitted. The returns are solid but not spectacular. But the social impact would be exactly what Margaret would have wanted, Hartley finished quietly. He was staring at one particular rendering, the literacy center, designed to be the heart of the development, with large windows and welcoming spaces. We talked for 2 hours. Not just about square footage and profit margins, but about his wife's vision, about building communities instead of just buildings. He asked hard questions about financing, About construction timelines, about how to ensure the community programs would survive long term. "You've done your homework," he said finally. "But tell me, Miss Morrison, why isn't this coming through official Morrison and Associates channels? Why the personal approach?" I'd prepared for this question, but sitting there, looking at this man, who'd built an empire but still grieved his wife's mission, I decided on complete honesty, because Morrison and Associates, under current leadership, would never approve this proposal. They'd see the community integration as unnecessary expense, the affordable housing as a drain on profits. They'd value the building over the purpose. And you disagree with that philosophy. My father disagreed with it. He died when I was 16, but I remember his vision for what our company could be. Not just builders, but community partners. Richard, my uncle, dismantled most of Dad's projects. After he died, Hartley studied me for a long moment. "You're taking a considerable risk, approaching me like this. What do you hope to gain?" "Honestly, I'm not entirely sure. Maybe I just needed to prove to myself that I could create something meaningful, even if Morrison and Associates never builds it. Or maybe," I took a breath, "maybe I'm hoping that if the right opportunity presents itself, things could change." He smiled slightly. "Margaret always said change only comes when someone's willing to risk comfort for conviction." He stood, extending his hand. "I'd like to see more detailed proposals. Can you have something comprehensive to me by next week?" I shook his hand, trying to contain my excitement. "Absolutely. And Miss Morrison, keep this between us for now. I have a feeling the landscape might look different soon." I left the Willis Tower feeling like I was walking on air. The November sun had broken through the clouds, warming the city despite the chill. I wanted to call someone, to share this victory, but who? Not Marcus, he was in depositions all day. Not Sarah, she'd insist we celebrate immediately, and I needed to get back to the office. Definitely not anyone at Morrison and Associates. As if summoned by my thoughts, my phone rang. Richard's assistant, Carol. "Emma, Mr. Morrison wants to see you in his office." Immediately, the warmth drained from my body. There was no way he could know about the Hartley meeting. Unless I made it back to the office in record time, my mind racing through possibilities. The elevator ride felt endless, each floor counting up to what might be my professional execution. Richard's office door was open. He sat behind his massive desk, and he wasn't alone. George Brennan occupied one of the guest chairs, the client from the $50,000 mix-up Richard had thrown in my face earlier that week. "Sit," Richard commanded. I sat, keeping my expression neutral. "George has something to tell you," Richard said, his tone unreadable. Brennan shifted uncomfortably. He was a small man, precise, with the demeanor of someone who'd spent his life managing other people's money. "I wanted to apologize," Brennan said, not quite meeting my eyes, "about the specification changes. My project manager should have communicated them properly. The mix-up was entirely our fault." I blinked, surprised. "I appreciate that, Mr. Brennan. Furthermore," he continued, "I was impressed by how quickly you caught the error and prevented larger issues. Your attention to detail saved both our companies significant money and delays." "Thank you," I managed. "George has agreed to sign on for 3 more projects," Richard added, his jaw tight. "He specifically requested you as the point person." The room fell silent. Richard's face was a study in controlled fury. He'd clearly expected Brennan to support his narrative of my incompetence, not contradict it. "I'll make sure to give these projects my full attention," I said carefully. After Brennan left, Richard and I sat in tense silence. "Don't let it go to your head," he finally said. "One client's preference doesn't change the fundamental issues we discussed." "Of course not," I agreed mildly. "Will that be all?" He waved me out, but I caught his expression as I left, calculating, suspicious. He knew something had shifted but couldn't quite identify what. Back at my desk, I found an email from David Chen. "Heard you had an interesting meeting this morning. Coffee tomorrow?" The corporate grapevine was faster than the internet. If David knew, others would too. I needed to work fast. That evening, I met Grandpa for dinner at his favorite steakhouse. Proof that the next generation of builders can honor the past while creating a better future. I clicked to my final slide, a rendering of the completed development at golden hour. With children playing in the community garden, professionals heading to work, seniors attending classes in the literacy center named for Margaret Hartley. My uncle told me last week that I was worthless to our company because I think beyond quarterly profits. He might be right. Maybe I don't belong at Morrison and Associates as it exists today. But I believe this city is ready for something better. The question is, are you? Silence? Then Robert Walsh started clapping. Slowly at first, then joined by others, until the room filled with applause. Questions? I asked when it died down. They came fast and sharp. Dr. Okonkwo grilled me on the healthcare clinic integration. Margaret Chen pushed hard on the technology infrastructure. A man I didn't recognize introduced as Thomas Hartley, James's son, challenged every financial assumption. I fielded them all, drawing on 6 years of suppressed ideas, of innovations researched in secret, of dreams deferred but not destroyed. An hour passed, then 2. The questions grew more specific, more interested. Miss Morrison, Margaret Chen finally said, what you're proposing would require a construction company willing to accept lower margins in exchange for longer term, more stable returns. Does Morrison and Associates have the vision for that? The room held its breath. This was the real question, not whether the project could work, but whether my family's company could evolve to build it. Not yet, I admitted. But companies change when leadership changes. And leadership is about to change. Is that so? Thomas Hartley's tone was skeptical. Your uncle seems quite entrenched. My grandfather owns 40% of Morrison and Associates. He's been silent for years, letting Richard run things. But he's not silent anymore. I met each of their gazes. Change is coming. The question is whether you want to be part of shaping it. James Hartley stood. Thank you, Miss Morrison. We'll need some time to discuss, but I think I speak for everyone when I say this has been illuminating. I packed up my materials, hands steady now that the adrenaline was fading. As I reached the door, Margaret Chen called out, Emma, your father would be proud. I managed to make it to the elevator before the tears came. The rest of the day passed in a blur. I returned to Morrison and Associates, moving through routine tasks while my mind stayed in that room with Chicago's changemakers. Around 3, Carol appeared at my desk. Your uncle wants to see you. Richard's office felt colder than usual. He stood at the window, hands clasped behind his back, watching the city below. Sit, he said without turning. I sat. I had an interesting lunch today, he continued. With Thomas Hartley. Seems his father's been taking meetings about the development. Meetings with junior employees who don't have the authority to negotiate, on behalf of Morrison and Associates. My phone, tucked in my pocket, vibrated. I ignored it. I can explain. No. He turned, and his face was darker than I'd ever seen it. No explanations. No excuses. You went behind my back, tried to steal a client, embarrassed this company. You're done. You're firing me. But that would create complications with Dad, and I need this transition to be smooth. So here's what's going to happen. You're taking a leave of absence. Effective immediately. Health reasons, stress, whatever story you want. You'll keep your insurance, get a modest severance, and quietly fade away. And if I refuse, his smile was cold. Then I'll make sure everyone in this industry knows you can't be trusted, that you're a loose cannon who undermines her own company for personal gain. Good luck getting hired anywhere after that. My phone buzzed again. Then again. I need time to think, I said. You have until tomorrow morning. Now get out of my office. I left, walking past curious coworkers who'd probably seen Carol fetch me. At my desk, I finally checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Grandpa. 2 from James Hartley. 1 from a number I didn't recognize. I called Grandpa first. Don't sign anything, he said without preamble. Don't agree to anything. Richard's panicking, which means you're winning. He wants me to take a leave of absence or he'll destroy my reputation. Let him try. I've made some calls. The December board meeting has been moved up to next week. Emergency session. I'll be proposing some changes to the company structure. Grandpa, trust me, sweetheart. I've been playing this game since before Richard was born. Just keep your head down for a few days. Next, I called Hartley. Emma, wonderful timing. The group was impressed. Very impressed. We want to move forward, but we need assurance that Morrison and Associates can deliver what you're promising. There might be some complications, I admitted. So Thomas told me after his lunch with your uncle. Interesting man, Richard. Very focused on why we should go with his original proposal. Spent a lot of time explaining why your ideas were financially irresponsible. He paused. He didn't realize Margaret Chen was at the next table. Oh God. Mr. Hartley James, Please, and don't worry. If anything, Richard's behavior confirmed that you're the right person for this project. The group has a proposition for you. Can you meet tomorrow? Same place, just the core team. Yes, absolutely. The unknown number had left a voicemail. I played it, expecting a telemarketer. Miss Morrison, this is Barbara Walsh from the Tribune. I'm working on a story about the future of Chicago development and heard you gave quite a presentation today. I'd love to get your perspective on where the industry is heading. Please call me back at ... I deleted it. The last thing I needed was press attention before Grandpa's board maneuver. That evening, I met Sarah and Marcus at my apartment. They found me on the couch, staring at Richard's unofficial termination letter that had been delivered by courier. Let me see that, Sarah said in full lawyer mode. She read it twice, then laughed. This is pathetic. Full of implied threats, but nothing actionable. He's scared. Scared enough to try to destroy my career. Only if you let him, Marcus said. What did Hartley say? I told them about the proposition meeting tomorrow. About Grandpa's board play. About Margaret Chen overhearing Richard's lunch. This is perfect, Sarah said. Richard just proved to Chicago's power brokers that he's exactly what's wrong with old-school development. Meanwhile, you're offering them a vision they want to be part of. But without Morrison and Associates, who says you need Morrison and Associates? Marcus interrupted. If Richard forces you out, start your own firm. You've got the relationships, the vision, and apparently, the backing of some serious players. With what money? What resources? Details, Sarah waved dismissively. The point is, you're not trapped. Richard thinks he holds all the cards because he's got the company title. But titles don't build things. People do. We ordered Chinese food and spent the evening wargaming scenarios. What if the board backed Richard? What if Hartley wanted to work exclusively with Morrison and Associates, not me personally? What if Richard made good on his threats? You're catastrophizing, Sarah finally said. Look at the facts. You've got Hartley interested. You've got Grandpa making moves. You've got clients specifically requesting you. Richard's the one playing defense. She was right. But knowing it and feeling it were different things. That night, I couldn't sleep. I stood at my window, watching the city lights twinkle in the cold, and thought about my father. He'd died before teaching me how to fight these battles. But maybe he'd taught me something more important, how to build something worth fighting for. My phone rang at midnight. Grandpa, can't sleep either. I asked. Sleep is overrated. Listen, I've been making some calls. Seems Richard's been busy too. He's trying to shore up board support, making promises about dividend increases, talking about selling off some of our less profitable community projects. He can't do that without board approval. He can if he convinces them it's necessary for financial stability, unless someone provides an alternative vision. He paused. That presentation you gave today. The board needs to see it. Richard will never let that happen. Richard doesn't get a vote on what I present as a major shareholder. Emergency session rules allow any shareholder with more than 25% to present strategic alternatives. I've got 40, Grandpa. This could tear the company apart? It's already torn, sweetheart. The question is whether we rebuild it as something better or let Richard sell it off piece by piece. His voice grew firm. Your father believed Morrison and Associates could be more than just profitable. He believed we had a responsibility to the communities we built in. That's the legacy worth saving. After we hung up, I finally managed a few hours of sleep. I dreamed of buildings rising from empty lots, of communities thriving where once there was only broken concrete, of my father, young and vibrant, showing me blueprints for a better city. Tuesday morning came crisp and bright. I dressed carefully. Black suit Sarah had recommended, my father's diamond studs, my grandmother's watch. Armor for a different kind of battle. The meeting with Hartley's core team was smaller, just 5 people in a private dining room. James Hartley, Margaret Chen, Robert Walsh, Dr. Okonkwo, and Thomas Hartley. We'll get straight to the point, James began. We want to fund your vision, not just for this development, but as a model for urban construction going forward. But we need the right partner to execute it. Morrison and Associates, I started. Isn't that partner? Thomas interrupted. Not under current leadership. We've done our homework. Richard Morrison has spent the last decade maximizing profits while minimizing community investment. He's everything we're trying to move away from. But you, Margaret Chen continued, represent what we're moving toward. So we have a proposal. Robert Walsh slid a folder across the table. We're prepared to back you personally. Seed funding for your own development firm. You build the Hartley project as your flagship, prove the model works, and revolutionize how this city thinks about construction. I opened the folder, saw the number, and forgot how to breathe. That's generous. It's strategic, Dr. O'Connor said. We've been looking for someone to champion this approach. You've got the vision, the connections, and frankly, the personal story to make it resonate. The prodigal daughter, returning to honor her father's legacy by creating something new. What about Morrison and Associates? James leaned forward. What about it? If they want to be part of the future, they'll need to evolve. If not, the market will leave them behind. My grandfather still owns 40%. This is his life's work. Then give him something better to pass on, Thomas said. A granddaughter, who didn't just inherit a company, but built something transformative. They gave me 48 hours to decide. As I left, Margaret Chen pulled me aside. Your uncle tried to intimidate you yesterday. He gave me an ultimatum. Leave quietly, or he'll ruin my reputation. She smiled, sharp as a blade. Richard Morrison thinks this industry still runs on his old boys network. He's about to learn how much has changed. Whatever you decide, you won't face him alone. I walked back through the city, the folder tucked under my arm, feeling the weight of possibility. They were offering me everything: freedom, funding, the chance to build my vision without fighting Richard for every decision. But it would mean walking away from Morrison and Associates, from Grandpa's legacy, from the company my father had loved despite its flaws. My phone rang. Carol, Richard's assistant, Emma. I probably shouldn't tell you this, but Mr. Morrison just called an all-hands meeting for tomorrow morning. He's going to announce restructuring plans. I thought you should know. Restructuring, code for eliminating anything that didn't maximize profits. He was moving to consolidate power before the board meeting. Thank you, Carol. Emma. A lot of us know what you've been trying to do. What your father wanted for this company. Just ... Don't give up on us, okay? I hung up, decision crystallizing. Richard thought he'd won by forcing me into a corner. But corners were just another place to build from. I called Grandpa. I need everything you have on the company bylaws. Specifically, succession planning and emergency shareholder provisions. Now you're thinking like a Morrison, he said proudly. Come for dinner. We have work to do. The war for Morrison and Associates was entering its final phase. Richard had drawn first blood, but I'd learned something important. Sometimes, the best way to save something was to be willing to lose it. And sometimes, the best way to honor a legacy was to build something new from its foundations. The emergency board meeting was scheduled for Thursday at 2 p.m. By Wednesday morning, the Morrison and Associates office felt like a war zone, with employees choosing sides in whispered break room conversations. I wasn't supposed to be there. Leave of absence was technically in effect, but I'd come in early to clean out my desk. What I found instead was a small rebellion. Emma. Carol intercepted me at the elevator, looking panicked. Thank God you're here. Richard's lost it. He's been firing people all morning he thinks might be loyal to you or your grandfather. He can't do that without cause. He's calling it restructuring. Says the company needs to trim fat to stay competitive. She lowered her voice. He fired Jacob from accounting because Jacob mentioned your Hartley presentation sounded innovative. My phone buzzed. Marcus, check the Tribune business section. Now, I pulled up the article on my phone, and my blood chilled. The headline read, Morrison and Associates in turmoil, leadership battle threatens Chicago construction giant. The article Byland by Barbara Walsh detailed the internal conflict, Richard's aggressive restructuring, and speculation about the company's future. But buried in the middle was a bombshell anonymous sources claiming Richard had been negotiating to sell Morrison and Associates to a national competitor. He wouldn't, I breathed. Wouldn't he? Carol asked. If he can't control it, why not cash out? I called Grandpa immediately. He answered on the first ring. I've seen it, he said before I could speak. My lawyers are reviewing whether he has the authority to negotiate a sale without board approval. Can he? Not officially? But if he convinces the board it's the best option, especially with the company in turmoil, single quotes, ... double quotes, he trailed off. Emma, I need you at the board meeting tomorrow. Richard banned me from the building. Richard doesn't own the building. I do. The land, the steel, the concrete, I paid for every inch. You'll be there as my representative. I spent the rest of Wednesday at Grandpa's house, preparing for the fight of our lives. His dining room became a war room, covered in financial documents, bylaws, and architectural plans. Look here, Grandpa pointed to a clause in the company charter. Emergency succession provision. If the CEO is found to be acting against the company's best interests, the board can vote for immediate replacement, but Richard has allies on the board, 3 of them, maybe 4, but there are 12 board members total. He smiled grimly. And some of them remember why this company was founded. Time to remind the others. That evening, an unexpected ally emerged. David Chen called with intelligence. The national competitor, Richard's talking to. Titan Construction. They have a reputation for buying family companies, stripping assets, and eliminating competition. If Morrison and Associates sells to them, your community development dreams die forever. Why are you telling me this? Because Chicago needs what you're building, and because Titan tried to buy my company 2 years ago. I've seen their playbook. Richard's so focused on beating you, he doesn't realize they're playing him. I shared the information with Grandpa, who immediately called his lawyers. By midnight, we had a counter-strategy. Thursday arrived, gray and sleeting, the kind of weather that made Chicago feel like a fortress under siege. I dressed in my sharpest suit armor for corporate battleland arrived at Morrison and Associates an hour before the meeting. The security guard, Tony, who'd known me since I was a teenager, looked uncomfortable. Miss Morrison, I have orders not to let you in. From Richard? Yes, ma'am. I pulled out my phone and called Grandpa. He must have been waiting, because 30 seconds later, Tony's phone rang. Yes, Mr. Morrison. I understand, sir. Of course, sir. He hung up and buzzed me through. Welcome back, Miss Morrison. Give 'em hell. The executive floor was eerily quiet. Richard's office door was closed, but I could hear voices inside his war council, no doubt. I made my way to the boardroom, where maintenance staff were setting up for the meeting. Emma. I turned to find Martin Zhao, one of the board members and an old friend of my father's. He looked tired, older than his 60 years. Martin. I wasn't sure you'd be here, wouldn't miss it. This company meant everything to your father. I won't watch it be destroyed by ego and greed. He paused. I assume you have a plan. Grandpa and I have a proposal. But we need 7 votes. You have mine. And I think Patricia Williams will listen. She's been concerned about Richard's direction. The others, ... He shrugged. You'll need to convince them. By 1:45, board members began arriving. I positioned myself where they'd see me. A visual reminder that this wasn't just about corporate maneuvering, it was about family, legacy, and the future of what we built. Richard arrived at 1:55, saw me, and his face went purple. What are you doing here? Attending a board meeting as my grandfather's representative, I said calmly. As is his right as primary shareholder. You were told to stay away. You told me to stay away. You don't speak for the board. I met his glare steadily. Yet, Grandpa arrived exactly at 2, moving slowly but steadily, dressed in the same type of suit he'd worn to build an empire. The room fell silent as he took his seat. Gentlemen, ladies, he began, his voice carrying the authority of decades. We're here because Morrison and Associates is at a crossroads. My son Richard has called this meeting to discuss restructuring. I'm here to discuss survival. Richard stood. Dad, with all due respect, you've been retired for years. The construction industry has changed. We need to adapt or die. Agreed, Grandpa said mildly. The question is how we adapt. By selling our soul to the highest bidder. Or by remembering why we build. Enough philosophy, Richard snapped. Let's talk facts. Revenue is down 8%. Competitors are undercutting us. We need to streamline operations, focus on high-margin projects, and yes, potentially consider strategic partnerships. You mean selling to Titan Construction? I said. The room erupted. Several board members clearly hadn't known about the negotiations. Richard's allies tried to restore order while others demanded explanations. How dare you, Richard started. How dare I, what? Tell the truth. I stood, pulling out copies of David Chen's intelligence. Titan Construction has bought 6 family companies in the last 5 years. All were dissolved within 18 months, their assets stripped, their employees terminated. Is that the legacy you want, Uncle? Better than bankruptcy, Richard shot back. Which is where your bleeding heart community projects would take us. Really? I activated the projection system, displaying my financial models. Because the Hartley project, built on community development principles, projects 15% returns over 10 years. Lower than your quick flips, but sustainable, stable, and it comes with something your spreadsheets can't measure: respect. Respect doesn't pay bills. No, but it builds relationships. And relationships build empires. I clicked through slides, showing letters of intent from other developers interested in similar projects. James Hartley isn't alone. There's a movement toward sustainable, community-focused development. Morrison and Associates can lead it or be left behind. Board member Patricia Williams raised her hand. These projections assume we can deliver this new model. Do we have the expertise? We have me, I said simply. I've spent 6 years learning every aspect of this business, despite being told repeatedly that I was worthless. I've brought in major clients, solved problems, and now I've created a vision that has Chicago's most influential investors ready to partner with us. You went behind the company's back, Richard accused. I went above your head, I corrected. There's a difference. You decided I was worthless before I ever had a chance to prove otherwise. So I proved it to people who would listen. Martin Zhao spoke up. I moved to hear Samuel Morrison's full proposal. Seconded, said Patricia Williams. Richard looked like he wanted to object, but parliamentary procedure was sacred in boardrooms. Grandpa stood slowly. My proposal is simple, he said. Morrison and Associates needs new leadership. Leadership that honors our past while building for the future. Leadership that sees construction as more than profit margins. He paused, looking at each board member. I propose Emma Morrison as CEO of Morrison and Associates. The explosion was immediate. Richard's allies protested loudly, while others looked intrigued but skeptical. I hadn't expected this. We'd discussed me joining the board, maybe taking a senior VP role. But CEO, she's 28 years old. Richard shouted. I was 25 when I started this company, Grandpa reminded him. Age means nothing. Vision means everything. This is insane. She has no experience running a company. Neither did you when you took over, Patricia Williams observed. And you were handed a thriving business. Emma would be taking on a company in crisis that requires innovation, not just management. The debate raged for an hour. Financial projections were questioned, strategies dissected, my qualifications examined from every angle. Through it all, I answered steadily, drawing on everything I'd learned, everything I'd dreamed. Finally, board member Charles Foster, who'd been silent throughout, spoke. Miss Morrison, if you become CEO, what happens to those of us who've supported Richard? The room held its breath. This was the key question: would I seek revenge or reconciliation? Everyone who wants to build something meaningful has a place at Morrison and Associates, I said. I don't care who you supported. I care what you contribute going forward. Uncle Richard is a skilled operations manager. If he's willing to work with me instead of against me, there's a role for him. Richard laughed bitterly. Work for my niece. You really are your father's daughter, Neve, to the end. My father believed in redemption. In building bridges instead of walls. That naivety built half of Chicago's skyline. I met his gaze. But make no mistake, if you can't adapt to the new vision, then yes, you'll need to find another company to run into the ground. Enough discussion, Grandpa said. I call for a vote. All in favor of Emma Morrison as CEO. Hands rose. Martin Zhao, Patricia Williams, Charles Foster, surprisingly. 2 others I hadn't expected. Then, slowly, 2 of Richard's allies raised their hands. 7. We had 7. Motion carries, Grandpa announced. Effective immediately, Emma Morrison is CEO of Morrison and Associates. Richard stood so fast his chair toppled. This isn't over. I'll sue. You'll what? Grandpa's voice was steel. Destroy the company out of spite. Prove Emma right about your priorities. Sit down, Richard. Incredibly, Richard sat. You have a choice, Grandpa continued. Accept the new direction and remain as coup, where your operational skills can shine. Or leave with a generous severance and my disappointment. Decide by Monday. The meeting adjourned in chaos, but I barely noticed. Board members approached with congratulations and concerns, questions and suggestions. Through it all, one thought echoed. I was CEO of Morrison and Associates. That evening, the core team from Hartley's group met me for champagne at the Chicago Club. News of the boardroom coup had already spread through the business community. Congratulations, James Hartley said, raising his glass. Though I admit, we're somewhat disappointed. We were looking forward to funding your independent venture. Morrison and Associates is my venture now, I said, and we're going to build your vision together. To building communities, Margaret Chen toasted. To proving worthless nieces wrong, Thomas Hartley added with a grin. The next morning, I arrived at Morrison and Associates to find a crowd in the lobby. Employees who'd been fired in Richard's purge. Others who'd feared for their jobs, all waiting to see if the rumors were true. Is it real? Carol asked. Are you really CEO? It's real, I confirmed. And everyone Richard fired is rehired, effective. Immediately, we have work to do. The cheer that went up could probably be heard in Richard's office. If he was even there, he hadn't come in, according to security. I spent the day in back-to-back meetings. Department heads who'd been afraid to innovate under Richard suddenly had a decade of ideas. The phone rang constantly, clients who'd heard about the change, competitors testing the waters, press wanting statements. Emma Jacob from accounting appeared at my door, looking uncertain. Richard fired me for supporting you. Am I really? You're really rehired. In fact, I need you to lead a new department. Community impact analysis. Every project we consider, I want to know how it affects the neighborhoods we build in. Can you do that? His face lit up. I've actually been working on models for that. In my spare time, of course. He had Richard suppressed in his pursuit of safe profits. By Friday afternoon, I was exhausted but exhilarated. The company was buzzing with new energy. Plans for the Hartley development were moving forward. 3 other developers had reached out about similar community-focused projects. A knock on my door now bearing a temporary nameplate reading Emma Morrison, CEO, interrupted my review of contracts. Richard stood in the doorway, looking older than I'd ever seen him. May I come in? I gestured to a chair. He sat heavily, staring at his hands. I spoke with Dad, he said finally, and with Margaret Chen. She told me what you presented to Hartley's group. It was ... impressive. I waited. I hated your father, he admitted. Not because he was bad, but because he was better. Better with people, better with vision, better at seeing what mattered. When he died, I thought I could finally prove I was just as good, but all I proved was that I could maintain what Dad built. I couldn't grow it. Richard, you were right. I was scared. Scared of you because you're just like him. Same vision, same stubborn belief that business can be more than numbers. He looked up. I've been a fool. You've been hurt, I said gently. Grief makes us do terrible things sometimes. Grief made me cruel. Made me try to destroy the very thing my brother loved. He stood. I'll take the coup position, if you'll have me. I want to learn how to build your way. Our way. I stood too, extending my hand. Welcome to the new Morrison and Associates. He shook it, then surprised me by pulling me into a brief, awkward hug. Your father would be proud, he said roughly, then left before I could respond. That weekend, Grandpa hosted a celebration dinner. Family, friends, and the new partners who'd believed in the vision. As I stood to give a toast, I thought about the journey from that rainy day when Richard called me worthless, to those who see potential where others see problems. I raised my glass. To building more than buildings. To proving that the next generation can honor the past while creating a better future. And to everyone who's ever been called worthless, may you prove them spectacularly wrong. The room erupted in cheers and applause. Through the restaurant window, Chicago's skyline glittered in the cold November night. Soon, we'd add to it not just with steel and concrete, but with communities, with hope, with proof that